Right, welcome to yet another Omni Ranger Wednesday webinar. I hope you're all going to enjoy this webinar as much as I have, seeing the test and practice runs. A couple of quick of the normal housekeeping rules, please. Questions in Q&A. We don't look at hands up, unfortunately. There are too many people there, but use the chat room to chat to one another, and the Q&A to ask questions, and obviously right at the end of the presentation, then Paddy will answer the questions for you. So I'm going to read Paddy's story as he wrote it, so that you can hear his background. So thank you for this, Paddy. Rather than being called Peter Jr., I was called Paddy Gordon, and the name stuck. From a very young age, my love for the outdoors was instilled in me by my father, Peter Sr. I have worked for the South African National Parks for 32 years, starting as an educational officer in Knysna, and since then managing a number of national parks across the country. My first was the Richtersveld National Park, then Mountain Zebra National Park near Cradock, Table Mountain National Park for 15 years, the Garden Route National Park, and currently Golden Gate Highlands National Park. Whilst park manager for the Garden Route, I was also acting park manager for Tsetsikama National Park for a year. I therefore claimed the Tsetsikama as my sixth national park. My basic education is a science degree with honours in botany, and thereafter I obtained a postgraduate qualification in education and business management. The privilege of managing different and challenging parks have been a range of outdoor classrooms that have afforded me an exceptional educational experiences. I am among men truly blessed. Paddy, thank you very much for that intro that you wrote for us, and I now will hand over to you to proceed with your presentation. Oh, sorry, one quick word to everybody. Due to bandwidth problems, I'm running Paddy's slides for him, so don't get concerned when he keeps saying next. He's telling me what to do. So, Paddy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the intro, and welcome everybody. It's intimidating to have so many people in the audience, but it's great to meet you. To those that already know me from other parks, it's great to have you as well. Yes, let's start with a bit of context, please. Next slide. Please, can I do just two little snippets of context that will explain a lot of what we're going to go through today. One might be a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I have two national parks that I've enjoyed extremely very much to walk in. One was Mountain Zebra and the other one was the Karoo National Park. And as these parks developed, we reintroduced rhino, buffalo, and lion, which was great for these national parks, but it meant that we lost the ability to walk, and I felt something was lost. Our parks are always beautiful, beautiful places from a car or from walking, but I come from that preconceived idea that parks need to be walked. Next slide, please. The next context, I think many of you will identify with. I was moved to Golden Gate after managing coastal parks for 18 years, in fact, more than 18 years. Moving to Golden Gate and arriving here at the end of February 2020. 2 months later, we went into full lockdown. Here I was with a 12-year-old teenager, 14 hours away from Cape Town, friends and family, and no prospect of really making friends even in the lower and later levels of lockdown. I was determined, and we took a conscious decision. We're not only going to survive Golden Gate, we're going to go out of our way, take the trouble to find, explore, and celebrate the beautiful places all across the Golden Gate. And this led to us going for walks every single Sunday for the last 2 years. And although the intention was not to go for photographic outings, we just ended up seeing things, seeing places, coming across views that was just so extraordinary that I ended up just taking hundreds of photos. And today is a little bit of a pocket edition of all of these photos that I've taken. And I hope you enjoy the journey that I've got you on. Next, Peter. I like to start with the well-known Brandwag Cottages. Everybody knows it and associates it with Golden Gate. I don't know how many people know that this is actually not the Golden Gate. The Golden Gate is actually a rock formation about a kilometer further to the west, but this is the one that everybody knows. It's right on the doorstep of the hotel. I beg your pardon. And it is the obvious one that we should all walk. I call it the Journey of Enlightenment because it's so imposing and so intimidating, this rock. It looks impossible to climb. But if you follow the path, most walkers will get to the top in less than an hour. And the feeling of accomplishment that you have at the top is really absolutely worth doing. And of course, after you overcome that high of the accomplishment, you get to enjoy the views from the top. Next. You look directly down on the Brandwag or the Golden Gate Hotel with its chalets. Next. In the same direction west, you look further down the valley through all these sandstone formations, colors and shapes towards Clarence. In fact, if you could imagine with me, the second rock formation in this picture is actually the Golden Gate that was originally referred to. Next. Again, from the top of the Brandwag Cottages, but looking in the other direction towards the east, you look down. Is that you or me? I've got something on screen, sorry. You look down onto Glen Rhiannon, which is our campsite where there are Rondalwil chalets and our full camping site. Next. Also close to home, just behind the hotel, there's the Hallkrans hiking trail, where there are a few caves which allows you to get into them and experience that amazing experience in this photograph. I recall once taking a person from Johannesburg who runs a company that does stress therapy relief. And he simply said that he's got to move his business here because within this cave, he doesn't even have to do any talking. You can just feel your stress just floating away from you. Next. The other one close to the hotel is the Wodehouse Trail, quite a bit longer than the others, about a 4-hour hike. But what's amazing about the Wodehouse Trail is how quickly you gain height. In this slide, you can see how far I am above the hotel. Next. And within half an hour to an hour, you've raised a few hundred meters straight up, and you're constantly getting different views of the hotel from those heights. Next. Then we may venture a little bit further to the Highlands Mountain Retreat Cottages. These are the log cabins high up, close to the Wodehouse Peak. Level above sea level is about 2,200 meters. Now, for most people, this is a desired destination. Next slide. For me and my son, it was a starting point. This was a hike that wasn't even supposed to be an enjoyable hike. It was almost a site visit. I wanted to go and inspect the antenna towers at the top of Wodehouse Peak. However, it turned out to be one of the most spectacular hikes that I've had. Next. In an area called Crystal Pan. These are the largest herds of game that I've seen across the park. 120, 150 head of antelope. Eland, the biggest herd of eland that I've seen around, black wildebeest, red hartebeest, and some blesbok as well. It was intended to be a site inspection. It actually turned out to become one of my favorite hikes. Next. Then we walked throughout the entire year, all 4 seasons. We didn't walk in snow. This was only 1 day of snow, 1 day and 1 night of snow in the middle of winter. And Golden Gate is one of those parks which displays, or one of those areas which displays the 4 seasons most spectacular. You know when it's winter, you know when it's summer, spring, and fall. Of course, me coming from Cape Town, I didn't know that the thermometer dropped so far. Snow we used to, but temperatures dropped here the first winter to minus 15 degrees. And that was quite an experience. However, during the daytime, the skies are cobalt blue and very pleasant to walk in, as long as you make sure that you're back indoors by sunset. Next. Then the first signs and signs of hope that winter is coming to an end was the willow trees. Weeks and weeks before anything else showed the sign of life after winter, the willow trees suddenly hit a trigger and they started showing new signs of life and leaves all across the Golden Gate National Park. We know that they are exotics, but I've made peace with them. They've become a part of the identity of the Eastern Free State. Next. Then, of course, summer is our summer rainfall, summer thunderstorms, and suddenly there's water everywhere. You see the streams, you see the waterfalls, and of course, what I can't present to you here is the sound of water. Anywhere that you walk, you can hear the sound of water. And of course, when it is quiet, you can hear a rapid or a little waterfall up to a mile away. And it is just absolutely outstanding to know that there's water everywhere in the landscape over summertime. Next. In addition to the water being there, you become very aware of how the water has shaped the landscape. This is quite an easy trail to get to. It's called Echo Ravine. It's directly opposite the Glen Rhiannon camp. And it's quite a good idea to go and walk into Echo Ravine if you've had a light rain, because that's when you see the water coming through the roof of this very strange looking channel, an extremely spiritual experience. Yeah, thank you. No, that's fine. You can go to the next slide. This one is Cathedral Caves, become very well known and very popular hiking trail. Oh, I think it should become one of the natural wonders of the world. The way the rock formations have been cut through by water over millions of years is just something that you have to see once in your life. Next. Then there isn't really a spring flower season. But if you thought that the grassland consists of only grasses, you'd be very much mistaken. There's a myriad of annuals, bulbs, and geophytes and perennial plants. Unfortunately, there's something that flowers at all times of the year. And I can only take a few photos to show you some of the myriad of colors and things like that that I've seen everywhere. The one on the left, I think, is the Morea, and the one on the right is the Gladiolus. Next. Another geophyte that, again, I could only find when I was walking through very long distances was the Amaryllis on the left-hand side. And for me, coming from Cape Town, very nice to see Protea so deep in the Eastern Free State. These were flowering just in the last month, very brightly colored, quite tall trees, especially on the edge of the different bases and escarpment. Next. Then again, an example of plants and flowers that you simply will not see from a distance. They're completely invisible. These are two. The one on the left is the hyacinth, related to the hyacinth, and the one on the right, an orchid. They would be completely invisible. These are a few inches high and they're completely lost in long grass. You have to dig down into the grass to see them. And obviously to take a photograph, you're lying flat on your stomach in the long grass. Next. And I thought I'd throw in this photograph because sometimes you find yourself always looking down, but sometimes you have to look up. Cloud formations are just phenomenal when you're out there. Winter time, it's clear skies, but the other seasons you get these cloud formations. Thunderstorms obviously get these massive, massive cumulonimbus clouds forming in the distance. Next. Then we have a fifth season. That's the fire season, like the fynbos kingdoms. I'm very familiar with 18 years of managing fynbos parks, very familiar with fire and fynbos. Fire in grassland is completely new to me. It is also a fire-driven ecology. It has to burn, but where fynbos burns every 5 years, maybe every 10 years, the grassland burns every year. And it's quite intense to suddenly get into this environment where you know there's going to be a fire every year. In this photo, we are lighting the fires ourselves because the edge of the road becomes one of the huge risk areas from fires started by people throwing cigarette butts out of the window. Next. But what is a scenic beauty at the end of the fire season or after a fire is the stark landscape. As I said before, it's as if Golden Gate didn't have enough color on its palette We have to add a black to really add a lot of contrast into the picture. And it really makes for dramatic scenes. I've taken dozens of photographs. It's just incredible to see what the black has done to the landscape. Next. Then, of course, after the fire. Again, in Fynbos, I have a lot of experience of what happens after the fire. And here I had to go for a walk after the big fire in July last year to see what fire recovery and post-fire recovery looks like in the grassland biome. And sure enough, there was the resprouting of a variety of plants from underground stems, from bulbs, from roots. And this is photos taken 2 months after the fire, showing very quick recovery and a complete transformation of the entire landscape very, very soon after the fire. All these species having developed and evolved mechanisms to recover very quickly from fire and to evolve storage mechanisms so that they can recover and re-vegetate the landscape after the fire. Next. But it was the fires that urged me to expand my walking into other areas, because while these fires burned, my head ranger would explain over the phone and over the radio, the fires now moved from this kopje into that valley and then across this slanted hills, and I wouldn't know what he was talking about. And I felt great discomfort not knowing what is the threat that this fire holds and where this fire is moving to and how the fire is behaving. And I realized that I had to expand my walking to the eastern section of the park, which is the old Cottages section. And I did that by visiting the old farms and farmhouses, and again adding another series of dramatic pictures and sites of both the farmhouses, but also the signs of life and farms in that area. Next. This was the farm Amaryllis, which sits on the S22. It's not very, again, not very visible from the road. And not only the farmhouses were stunning, these striking images of farming practices like this row of sandstone plinths, which would have been a cheap replacement for wooden poles to put up a fence. Next. This striking image of a straight row of rocks that stretched as far as my eye could see right up against the mountain in the background must have been part of jackal proofing of a fence that occurred in this area. So you get the sense of really tough life, hard farming, but also if you see the health of the wildlife in the area, then it must have been a really positive experience to farm in these areas. Next. And I found myself starting a new habit of taking photographs through the windows and doorways of these ruins. Next. On the one side, they provided beautiful frames to the already beautiful area out there. But I also found myself speaking in very subdued tones whenever I went into these ruins. Now, I'm not sure whether I believe in ghosts or whether I'm just very keenly aware that people lived here. They spent their lives here. It must have been a beautiful life, but also a tough life. And you kind of respect that this was somebody's home at one stage. And people lived there and they loved there and they lost their loved ones there. And there are signs of these also wherever you go. Next. The houses are in ruins, but the graveyards are there to remind us of people's lives there and a reflection of how tough life must have been in this area to farm and to raise a family in this area. Next. And I think sometimes that perhaps looking through the windows like this is my idea of getting a sense of what it was like to live there, see what they saw and felt what they felt to live in this beautiful and yet tough environment. Next. But now to look through the doorway of people that lived here, perhaps even 1,000 years before that. This again is a cave that I could only have found because we were on foot, deep inside the park. Don't ask me where it is because I'm not going to tell you, but something very strange happened to me here. Long before I arrived at this cave, I drove up with my bakkie, which is a 4x4 bakkie, and I got to a part of the road where the road passed through two rocks. It was almost like a rock portal. And somehow I refused to drive through this rock portal. I stopped my car and I walked through the portal. And I've been there 3 times, and every time I do exactly the same. I refuse to drive through this rock portal. I walk through it. And again, I don't know whether it's my feeling that I'm entering an area of sanctity or whether there's an ancient spirit that's refusing to let me drive in there. But it was really an exceptional experience to just feel that I don't belong in there with a vehicle. If I'm going to go in there, I've got to earn it and walk in there. And we found this cave on the second visit to this area. And what was special about this cave is that we found 80 images of rock art against the walls. Next. And not only were there 80, it appears that there were either 3 different types of rock art or rock art from 3 different ages or periods in which the cave was habitated. There was a whole series of the images that had this typical ochre orange and the white head and white neck. Next. Then there was a series that had this reddish, deeper reddish color, very different from the previous one. This image, I have been told, is well studied by people who study into the rock art. What do the images what do the images actually mean? Is this just a literal depiction of an encounter with a snake? Is the snake that was seen during a trance dance, or is it a spiritual image of snake encounter with man? I don't know all of those stories, but it is a very special record that occurs inside the national park. Next. Then there's a third series, which are completely black. And even there, I feel that there could be 2 different periods, because some of them are starkly dark and clear black like this one. And then there's a whole series of them that are black but are completely faded. And you really feel as if you're on special ground when you're inside this cave. And it is one of those things that absolutely needs to be protected. And I feel privileged that the only way I got to find this place was because I was on foot. Next. In completely different area, in fact, this is the ridge directly above the Gladstone office that I went walking with my son, that we came across this etching in the rock. I've sent it to a few people to find out what it is. I've got a lot of interest, but I don't have a full explanation of what it is, what it actually means. The foot is there just to show you the size of it, very deeply gorged into the rock. It is believed to be not sand, but possibly shepherds or herders of cattle that played an indigenous game with the lines and perhaps pebbles and stones on it. I await, and I'll send it out again to find out, to get more information about this. It's not the first place that I've seen it. There is another place in the park that I've seen a similar image. Next. Now, at this point, please allow me to introduce my son, who was the one doing all of these walks with me. A typical teenager at 14 years old. He loves his Sony PlayStation, but my goodness, how at home he is when he is up there. No fear of the heights or the desolation that we are at, and a really amazing traveling companion. He doesn't tolerate my botanizing very much. He doesn't have patience when I lie in the grass flat on my stomach taking a photograph of a flower that's only 5 millimeters. But now and then he humors me, he'll tolerate me. Yeah, I asked him to help show out this euphorbia, quite one of the larger ones. I took it in such a way that you can see the valley in the background, just how high this euphorbia grows. And why I needed to take this photograph is to show that, I don't know how, but this particular euphorbia is extremely specific to its altitude. At this spot and other spots that I found it, you might find 20, 30 individuals, but go 20 meters down the hill and 20 meters up the hill, you find nothing, not even a single one. And it's really a surprise that I simply cannot understand or explain. It'll have to do with altitude, moisture, pressure, all of those mysteries that and many questions that still need to be answered. Next. What's also nice to have a fresh pair of eyes is I would never see something as almost invisible as this dragonfly. He spotted it from meters away, and also with many other insects and things. He just has the eye to spot movement and little things and life outside in the outdoors. Next. So botany is not going to be his thing. I'll have to make peace with that. But this is his thing. He seems to have formed the habit of finding a rocky throne, climbing up to it and making himself comfortable. And that's become his behavior. What he's going to become one day, I don't know. He can't wait for entering the world of virtual reality. But while I've got his attention, this has been a journey within a journey of discovery, of doing all this with a teenage boy. Next. This was his favorite one. Also climbed in there and actually told me that he believes he could sleep in that spot. Next. That is another one. This one is actually closer to home complex, close to Gladstone. I don't know if you can just about see him on the left there against the rock. And that is his thing, to climb up to a spot and make himself look very comfortable. Next. So this untidy shot I put in here intentionally to give you an idea of how these things happen, not too very planned. So this is a walk that we ended up at the edge of a cliff and we couldn't go any further. And often that is the cue. Okay, this is lunch pot. We break out the sandwiches and the coffee and the drinks, and on a flat rock, that just becomes the place where we have lunch. Far from everything in the middle of nowhere. Next. Other times, however, when you get to the edge of the cliff and you can't go any further, you look into a valley that absolutely taunts you. It calls my name and says you have to get down there somehow. And at that moment, you can't. You're just absolutely at the precipice. I mean, look at that valley. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's completely hidden from all directions, from any roads. You could only look into this valley from the edge of this cliff that we were at. And sure enough, we found our way into this valley from that and through that the valley to the right-hand side. And this was this past Sunday we got into this valley. Next. Most of the time when we go walking, we have no destination. We follow farm roads and visit the farms that used to exist in this area. And you just find yourself in the middle of an area where you can see almost forever in every direction. And there's no man-made structure anywhere in sight. So destination is not necessarily the idea behind a walk. Next. However, sometimes when you do go for a drive and you have some kind of a destination in mind, you come across something that just is unplanned. I hope that you can see this Dollarite dike goes all the way down the slope of the one hill, straight across the valley and up the other side. I was going to drive beyond this, but when I saw this, it was such a dramatic feature in the landscape, we had to stop. We walked up it. It was almost like an old castle wall. And once again, we just broke out lunch, sandwiches, and we stopped for the day. Next. This was another example of a place that we came across completely by accident, and it became the destination. We decided to walk a few hours along the Ribok Trail, starting at the Ribok Overnight Hut, and we found this absolutely solid rock tube with just about enough water in it, and that was it. That was our destination for the day. We weren't going to go any further. We climbed in and we stayed there for several hours. We could see from the marks on the rocks that had we got and found this place a week before, the water would have been so high that we wouldn't have been able to get in even, let alone swim. And most likely a week after, the water would have dried up and there would have been a few bottles with some water in it. So it was just absolute fortune that we found this at exactly the right time. Next. Now, you know that you've spent too much time in the wild when the rocks start speaking to you. Now, my colleague, soil scientist, says that the reason why you have these very many bald patches of rock all across the Golden Gate National Park is because the shallow soils actually freeze in winter. And what happens when that frozen soil starts to melt, you actually get a huge slab or slice of soil just sliding down and leaving the rocks exposed. But when you look at the ripples on this rock is telling you, yeah, that sliding icy thing only happened in the last 200 years. A couple of million years ago, probably 100 million years ago, this rock says it was a river. And these ripples represent what would have been a riverbed, probably sandy, probably a fast-flowing river causing the ripples in the sand. And if you study these ripples, the size of the ripples will tell you how fast-flowing the river was. And if you look at the ripples individually, you'll see that there's coarse sand on the one side of the ripple and fine sand on the other side of the ripple. And you could even then tell in which direction this river was flowing. Next. Look at this one. This rock tells me that it was a river at least twice in its lifetime. At one stage, a very wide flowing river, later covered with soil, and then a very narrow river cutting back through the soil onto the bedrock and gorging these potholes as it made its way across the rock face. Next. This is the same phenomenon. I just wanted to throw in this photo to show you just how high at that point we are above sea level. Probably about, my estimate, about 1,800 meters above sea level, quite high above the natural ground area of the Golden Gate. Next. Then, of course, if you listen even longer to the rocks speaking to you, the rocks will convince you that long ago there were monsters here. This is a riverbed somewhere, Eerste Geluk Farm, also in the Kokwa area. And there are footprints of baby Massospondylus. Now, paleontologists believe that there were at least 12 different kinds of dinosaurs here, perhaps even as high as 16. The one that occurred here that was most common was Massospondylus. The name simply means massive neck vertebra, vegetarian, and also a herding species. And this was an area that they frequented. And there are these baby footprints, but also in the same area, the footprints of adults. Next. And in addition to the footprints, when you know where to start looking for them, you start seeing the bones of these monsters, especially in the Elliott mudstone. And I've come across many, many of them because I simply start guessing where I might find them, and I start finding them in new places. And I'm constantly then in contact with Professor Jonah from Wits University, sending him pictures, and sometimes he'll say, nope, that's not it. And other times he says, oops, it's time for him to come for a visit and come and see these new bones again. Next. So these images, obviously, I did not find. That's a pity. But this is the nest of Massospondylus that took South African dinosaurs from local dinosaurs to international fame. The picture on the left is a plaster cast of the nest with 7 eggs in it that shows the cluster that was found by Professor James Kitching in the mid-1970s. And when they shaved away the eggs, they found that the embryo and the bones of the embryos were still inside. This suddenly made world news. The image on the right, I'm told, is a picture of the actual rock formation with the exposed embryo and the bones in it. At this stage, there have been other eggs found with embryos in it, but our nest and eggs are by far the oldest. Recently, I read about a find like this in China at 77 million years. The Massospondylus egg in Golden Gate is 200 million years. So we're still way up ahead, and by far, almost by 100 million years older than any other find across the world. Next. This is called the find site. It's called Rooidraai. It's just a couple of 100 meters from the Glenrenan camp. And what happened here is when this road, the provincial road, was widened, The road builders had the money that paleontologists don't have to cut through the side of the mountain. And in doing so, they exposed these layers of rock, cutting through the ages of geological time. And when the paleontologist James Kitching came along, this was like as if somebody had opened the textbook. And he asked what happened to the road rubble or the mountain rubble that was cut away from that side. And he was told, no, it was just simply dumped on the other side of the road. And when he dug among the rock rubble, he pulled out this thing that looked like a nest. And that was the start of the whole find and the whole rush to the international fame of this dinosaur and the nest that we found. Sorry, just getting some water. Next. So that was the reason for the building of the Dinosaur Interpretation Center. Building is located, again, a few hundred meters from that find site. Funded by the European Union, funding sought by Department of Tourism. So a lot of interest, a lot of expectation for this building to be completed. The good news is that it is now finally structurally and building-wise, it is complete. Practical completion has been handed over. What needs to be done now, obviously, is that the artwork, displays, models, and the technical stuff has to be done. It's a very, very impressive building, but it's an empty building. Those of you that can come around, I would love to show you through. It is really an impressive building. It is, from this angle, difficult to see, but it was meant to even look and be the shape of a dinosaur. In the middle there, that curved section is all glass. And at that section, you'll be able to be inside the building and look towards the famous mushroom rock. There will be business opportunities right in the bottom towards the right-hand side of the building, coffee shops, curio shops, play area for kids, all accommodated inside this building. Really, I can't wait for this thing to be finished. And I'm not the only one. I'm getting messages from around the world, all across the country, people saying that it's time to get done now. They're waiting in expectation. Next. This is my second last slide, and I thought I'd throw this in at this stage for all of those that say, oh man, I cannot walk, it's just not my thing. So for those who cannot walk, there are really stunning horse rides that give you also that sense of getting out, away from your vehicle, away from your accommodation, and just getting the sense, the smell, the sounds, and the sights of getting really close to the natural environment in Golden Gate. And that's it. Next. I thought I'd end with this, probably my favorite shot of the many plants and flowers that occur in the Golden Gate. This is a helichrysum growing on solid rock, and yet it's covered in flowers. I mean, that's for me an inspiration. And I think it's something that I'll take and keep with me. And that's it, folks. Thank you very much. I see some people saying that they didn't get the image. I feel so sorry. I'm very sorry for you. But I think Peter will probably describe how you can get access to the photos. I have hundreds and hundreds of these photos. It was quite a challenge to select the ones to give you an idea of different parts of the parks, different things that I've seen, places that you can only get to on foot, and then just the absolute variety that you see because of the different seasons in the park. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Paddy. That was great. You make me want to come back there again. But getting bookings in Highlands is sometimes difficult. So, but anyway, okay, a couple of questions and a couple of comments. First one is from Michelle Lambiotti. He just says, I want to say it was a privilege to have done the park on my bike, and what a wonderful park that it is. Sorry, I'm having to read these off of WhatsApp because when I'm sharing screen, I can't read the questions. Sandra Badenhorst, what time of the year would one see the waterfalls? Perhaps in February?
To answer that, yes. Look, we are summer rainfall areas, summer thunderstorms. So we start in November already. Today we're in early March, mid-March, and we still had a rainfall today. So there's throughout I would say November till February will be a good time to see waterfalls.
That's when we have a nice wet summer like the current one, and obviously different when we have a dry summer. Okay, Ian Mackenzie. He said, are the lines carved into the rock not possibly where tools were sharpened?
The lines are so straight and so perpendicular to each other, and at the whole Krans walk I saw very similar patterns. And then I don't know if I can go back to it. And then on the one side, it almost looks like a triangle that is very specifically there. So it's not impossible, but I think if you were sharpening an arrowhead or a knife, the lines would be far more random, not so extremely perpendicular. I'd really like to hear more of what it is about.
I must admit, to me, it made me think of up in Gubwe, where they've got those games engraved at the top of the mountain. So perhaps that was some sort of game they also played whilst they were watching their sheep or their cattle or whatever they used to graze there. Right. I think this is also from Ian Mackenzie. How many hiking trails are there to choose from, and what sort of distances?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but there are more than half a dozen. I see another question is about, are they all accessible? No, the areas that I went to are not all accessible, but there are a number of hiking trails. Many of them are 1 hour to 2 hours. The Wodehouse is a little bit tougher, it's 4 hours. And then we have one overnight hiking trail, the Ribbok Trail, with one overnight hut. That'll be 2 days hiking. Those 2 days both of them are plus 20 kilometers and quite steep. You will need to be quite fit to do those.
Well, I think as I commented to you the other day, I think you must be pretty fit when I see some of those places that you've been hiking. So anyway, a couple of questions which I'm actually surprised that I haven't seen them is, what are the plans for expanding the campsite?
There are two things that are going to have to happen. The one is that we have land claimants that have gone through a long process with us, and we are very lucky, number one, that the Cottages National Park was added to the original Golden Gate, because that multiplied the size of the park by 3. But with the Cottages National Park came land claimants, and they have been very kind to us in that they are not wanting to remove their land from the park. We'll manage it as part of the national park. But in return, we have to help them with some tourism and ecotourism ventures. And camping sites, hiking trails, 4x4 trails will be one of those. So that is one option that will occur roughly in the northern part of the park, northwest, not northeast perhaps. And then the other thing that's happening is that the current camping site is becoming too small. People are complaining that the proximity of the road is a problem because the road is getting busier. They feel a little bit threatened by the proximity of the road. I have just completed putting up a palisade fence to improve security there. But in the medium to long term, I'm definitely thinking of starting a new camping site in that open square behind the Glenrhiannon chalets, close to the rock pool. Everybody that I take there, the honorary rangers, are very interested in helping. They all agree that it just feels a lot safer, it's quieter, it is secluded, you don't have day walkers walking straight through the middle, and you don't have the road that close. So there are definitely in the short to medium term things that are going to happen.
Okay. Sorry, I'm reading questions from WhatsApp, and I think that I'm missing a couple because I see that you've got more on your screen, and I can't look at them whilst I'm sharing screen with you. So if you see any questions in the Q&A that you want to pick up and answer, please go ahead.
Yeah, they're coming through very quick, too fast for me to read. There was one question that asked, does it have to burn every year? We would prefer not to burn every year, but circumstances are that it will burn every year. From negligence from the outside, from stock farmers that illegally graze in the park, from farmers around us that start fires that they cannot control. And we only burn to protect our infrastructure. So we won't necessarily start massive fires of our own. We will burn around the hotel, around our buildings. We will burn a little strip in an area that we know the fires are going to come from. And we definitely burn along the main access roads. So we won't intentionally burn 10, 20 hectares. That's going to happen just because of fires from outside areas.
Okay, I've got one here from Reinhold Just. What animals can you see along the trails?
Look, you see animals just about in all directions. When I go running, I run behind the Gladstone, and I commonly see red arthropod, black wildebeest, and zebra. Strangely, I never see blesbok there, but you go on the other side of the park, you will see hundreds of blesbok, eland sometimes. I have seen grey reebok at times, and they are definitely in all areas of the park. What was amazing on the trail above the Highlands cottages, which is the sheer numbers of them, 100 black wildebeest just running away from us and creating this massive stream of animals that is almost impossible to catch on video. But they're visible in most parts of the park.
Okay, talking about lots of animals. A few years ago, I did was taken with some rangers on a 4x4 trail around the back of the park, and we were stunned at the number of animals. Is that ever going to be developed into a 4x4 trail that the public can drive on or be taken with rangers?
Peter, yes. I think that will be a really low key, not really developing the area, 4x4, possibly with an overnight hut at an existing farmhouse, but no major camp or no major development. That area is really extremely remote, wilderness area. And as you know, that area has so many animals that a lot of people refer to it as Little Serengeti. Beautiful, beautiful space.
It is wonderful. And whilst I'm monopolizing the questions, a quick question on the side out towards the Basotho village. You often see cattle grazing. Is that an agreement with the local people that you allow them to graze cattle in that area?
That could be the legal land claimants. And when the land claimants or the land claim settlement agreement eventually goes through, that cattle will reduce and eventually disappear. Part of the settlement agreement was that a number of them chose to not fight for land, they just wanted the money, so a lot of them are out of the equation. Some of them wanted houses in Pudaditjava, so that process is underway. They won't have land or cattle in the national park. And then we also, the sandparks also bought farmland way outside the park as an exchange agreement. So the ultimate aim is to get all of those legal cattle out of the park. But there are a few, 3 people, I think, that are illegally in the park as well. And that legal eviction process is also ongoing, but notoriously slow. I think the only advantage we have with this eviction is that the people that are living inside the park don't need houses. They have houses outside. The only reason why they're in the park is in order to take advantage of the grazing. So as you know, the legal process usually say you can only evict if you give somebody an alternative house. These people already have an alternative house. It is very slow, but we hope that is a bit of a gap in the door for us.
Okay. And one here, is anything done about poaching in the park? Antelope are hard hit by illegal harvesting from all and sundry. I'm not sure what sort of a poaching problem you have in Golden Gate.
No, with the fact that Pudaditjava is growing by leaps and bounds and getting closer and closer to the park, there's definitely poaching on that edge. A little bit of poaching from the Lesotho side, but probably more illegal grazing. It is easy to get across the Caledon River on the Lesotho side. But yes, poaching is a problem. It is a park that's almost impossible to fence. We fenced the entire northern section, which is bordered by farms. The southern section on the Lesotho side, you put up the fence this week, next week it'll be gone. And very, very similar on the Pudaditjava side. The only advantage that we have is the speed at which and the pace at which our antelope population grows is phenomenal. I don't speak good of it, but the chances of losing species in this area is low. The one that we're obviously very, very worried about and very sad about is the Arabi. The numbers have dwindled to single numbers. We don't think that is necessarily poaching. The scientists are studying studying the decline and the possibility of reintroducing, but possibly even just the proximity of farm and farm activities could have led to that decline. But it is a massive problem. The proximity, the open access park, and the provincial road that goes right through the middle of the park. Those are major challenges for us.
Okay, you actually touched on yet another question. On the loop that goes around past the Vulture Hide, etc. As you leave the main road, there's I forget what it's called, Orreby Valley or Orreby something, and I've never seen an Orreby there, and I've looked there for years.
Yep.
So that's obviously why why I have never seen one, because there's now so few.
No, that is correct. There are really single numbers, probably less than 10 in the entire park.
Oh.
Whereas with black wildebeest is 2,500, Lesbok probably 2,000. Huge numbers of the other antelope. But the Orreby is just vulnerable to something.
Okay, let's just see what we got. Okay. Marty Jasper. Is having a national road running through the park a long-term sustainable aspect? Does long-term planning look at changing this in some way?
Yeah. It's not going to change. It is the connecting roads for a lot of pedestrian traffic, but also for delivery traffic, to put it each other. It will remain a provincial road. I think if you're going to deproclaim that road, it will be a hell of a legal process to go through. But it also means that we'll probably have to budget 20 million rand a year to keep tarring it and replacing it. What has been done in the past, which we'll have to pick up soon, is permission from the provincial road authority to put security control points on the road, not to stop traffic that goes all the way through, but to control, to have number plate recognition technology that you can capture people going through, and if they know that they're being recognized, illegal activity immediately drops. It is known. And then also in terms of just park regulating, if you drive through, perhaps with a technology similar to that, it's called average speed over distance cameras that you see on the national roads. If you pass in the one gate and out the other gate in under 40 minutes, then you've just used the road. But if you pass in one gate and out the other gate and 2 hours later, then you've visited the park, you need to either explain or you need to pay a park conservation fee. So there are things that we can do. Security personnel is a huge limiting factor. It's extremely expensive manpower. So we are looking towards a combination of manpower and technology to see how we can at least put control measures in place if we cannot close the road.
Yeah, I would imagine closing that road would be almost impossible when you look at the problems that Marrakeli have had trying to close a road that's only provides access to 2 farmers, and that's taking them years. So I think you're right. I don't think that you could close that road, but technology will hopefully help you. All right. I think that's all as far as the questions are concerned. I can't see any more.
There was one that just popped out about cycling. Yes, Golden Gate has a lot of potential for off-road cycling. There are these regional services roads that are also in the area. The S22 and goes across the park. It's a gravel public road. It'd be perfect for cycling. And I sincerely believe, and I'm going to work in that direction, that Golden Gate can become a cycling destination. Not to the higher hiking trails, but some of the lower slopes, some of the gravel roads that traverse the park can definitely be accessible for cycling.
Great, wonderful. So, Paddy, thank you very much for your time and the effort and all this talking. There was one question, Zane Erasmus, thank you for the fantastic presentation and terrific photographs. Could you tell us about your camera equipment?
I was going to start by saying I'm not a photographer. I just happen to be in the right place at the right time. Well, so I don't have camera equipment. It's my iPhone. I've got an iPhone 11. I stick it in my pocket, and I just whip it out when I need to. But it works. But it's also very frustrating when you see. It very often happens when we we suddenly get into a valley, or we breach a hill and there's 50 antelope within 30 meters, 40 meters from you. And by the time you pluck out your cell phone, you swipe the screen and you punch in your code and you select the camera, hell, they've bolted, and you see the little dots and you see the little dots in the distance. And I make a sound that goes something like, and my son, strangely enough, says, "Dad, it's okay. We saw it. We saw it." So that's all I have. I have an iPhone, and you're going to find me lying flat on the ground taking these weird photographs. And I had this pleasure of sharing those with you.
Well, you've done very well with your iPhone. So once again, from everybody that's been watching, and I saw at one stage there, I think there were 340 participants. So there were a good number of people watching. And I know that we had some overseas people watching as well. So you've spread the word. I hope that your bookings zoom up now. But Paddy, thank you very much for your time and the effort that you put into this. Thank you from the Honorary Rangers for all of this and for everything that you do for that park. I think it's probably one of our underrated parks. It's only people like yourself that have spent time walking around and seeing things on foot that really appreciate how beautiful that park is. So from all of us, thank you very, very much for your time and your effort. I'm just quickly going to put a couple of other slides up about what we've got coming up next. So thank you, Paddy, and hopefully we'll all see you in the park soon.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thanks for the opportunity. And it's humbling to know that so many people have tuned in to listen. Thanks very much, everybody.
Sorry, Paddy, one last thing. Any approximate idea when the Dinosaur Centre will open?
I've always been told it'll take at least 6 months for the artwork to be done. So, and the artists would not start, and they won't start while the construction people are on site. So, as soon as the artists are appointed, from that point on, 6 months. So, for the earliest December, that will be really, really holding thumbs, really hoping for the best.
Good. I hope it is. I'm looking forward to my first visit there. So once again, thank you, Paddy, and look after yourself whilst hiking.
Thanks. That's my release from the frustrations from the office. Thanks, Peter.
Right. Thank you, everybody. So our next webinar in 2 weeks' time is about pollination, and I think we all know about the loss of insects and bees and things like that, the effect that it has on pollination of all sorts and crops and all that type of thing. So I think this will be a very, very interesting talk for us. So please join us then. And as always, thank you for joining us. And for those of you that don't know us, we are a totally volunteer organization, and the money that we do raise gets spent on projects that Sandparks ask us about. In fact, if you go to Golden Gate and you go into the Interpretation Centre, between the KZN region and the Free State region, I think they were mainly responsible for putting that entire Interpretation Centre together. So you can get an idea, and you can always go to our website and we'll have a look and see what sort of things we do. So thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you all in 2 weeks' time. Thank you and good night.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Paddy. Good night, all.